I'm Susie Hall. I'm president of community and customer engagement here at Aquent, where just over 2 weeks from now, I will have been for 26 years. What? We're a global talent agency that focuses on marketing, creative, and design. We've been around for 38 years, and I've seen a lot in terms of the changes in the job market over that time. Currently, what I do is I lead a community for senior design and creative leaders that is called Inside Out. Normally, what happens is we first engage with a client and understand what their needs are, and we ideally get a chance to ask them questions about what they truly need for that role. So that's generally where it starts, with what can be called an order, a requisition. We begin by understanding what the role is and talking to the client about that and asking a lot of detailed questions. I will say, in today's recruiting world, sometimes you do not get that hiring manager access. You're working through a system. So add technology to that equation, where you're working through a VMS or an MSP system where you don't get the human connection. You just get a bit of information, a little bit of time, and you have to be able to decipher what the client is looking for by being smart, crafty, and resourceful.
Okay.
So just thinking about when you're talking to a recruiter, they could be in either of those situations. So where they have a direct human connection or they don't have a direct human connection. So starting from there, understanding what the client is looking for, then we talk to a network of talent. And
Okay.
in an organization like Aquent, where you've been around for 38 years, we have an incredible group of talent that we've known for years and years, and all the referrals that come along with that. So we then will talk to talent and present them information about specific roles that would match their experience. When we have that conversation, it often encourages you to think about, hey, I have this one role that you might be great for, but because we're a large organization, we've been working with lots of companies for a long time. I have 5 other organizations that you might also be interested in. So the role of the recruiter really is a matchmaker. We're puzzle masters. That's literally what a recruiter does on the agency side of the business. So I've now not only got the perspective of helping hiring managers find people and also literally recruiting for talent to help them find jobs, but also getting to work with leaders who are living this job market from the standpoint of finding people and also, unfortunately, having to find their own roles because it's a mess
Yeah,
right
it's a
now.
mess. When did you see it start to, I've been saying it's imploding, but like when was the writing on the wall for you? When you were seeing some shifts, what were you seeing and how have things evolved or devolved
Yeah.
in more recent months?
Yeah. Wow, there's so many answers to that. And as I said, I've been here for 26 years, so
Yeah.
that's hard. I lived through 2000 and 2001, 2008 and 2009. So all of those changes in the market. I would definitely say everybody knows that the beginning of the pandemic was where this
Yeah.
started. And I don't think that it has ever figured itself out, the job market. I just don't think it's figured itself out since then. And it's wacky to think about that was 5 years ago that we've been going through all sorts of changes. And it's not just the impacts of the pandemic itself when we were living it, but also the even the where you work and how you work.
Right.
People simply haven't figured those things out yet. So I think that was the beginning of it. And then as AI entered the scene in 2023, November 2023, all of a sudden that threw everything into another level of chaos from the data standpoint for how people find one another, how you prepare your own job materials. All of that has changed radically, and organizations have a lot of interest in investing in this rapidly emerging technology. And unfortunately, they're finding that investment by displacing internal roles. All that together. Did I mention it's a mess, Claire?
Okay, so I was right when I said I don't know if Susie's going to give us hope, but she will give us
I
help.
will. I
Yeah.
have hope. I have hope. I
Okay.
have hope. I do.
All right, let's jump into the hope because what I'm getting a lot of is AI replacing my job. And my
Yep.
answer is yes. And there's other opportunities that are being
Yeah.
created because of AI as well. So I don't know if you want to
Yeah.
pick up the thread on AI or just where are you
Yeah.
feeling or
Yeah.
seeing any kind of happy momentum?
Happy momentum. That's funny. I literally just hosted a LinkedIn Live earlier today about AI with 2 senior leaders who have a lot of thoughts around human AI collaboration, what the future looks like. And there was a lot of hope in that conversation because we're humans and we have the opportunity to shape what comes next if we can harness how we interact with the technology and maybe stop freaking out about it a little bit.
Okay.
Enough to say, hey, we have a role and a place in this. And the same thing applies for the job market. AI has definitely disrupted how people find one another, but there's hope from the standpoint of when you think about how many people there are in the job market right now, how many jobs there are, how jobs have become global because you can work remotely. In a lot of cases, still, you can work remotely. Wow. So when you think about how much data is involved in the job market right now, AI can be a big help in
Okay.
that. But first, it's just disrupting. So to your point, is AI taking my job? There was a report by the World Economic Forum. You mentioned that in your
Yes.
last Higher Ground update. So that said that there will be a net increase of 70 million jobs. Jobs, there will be jobs.
Uh-huh.
Now, can we know what those jobs will be? Can we determine exactly how to find them? I think those are the questions that aren't necessarily answered. But in no uncertain terms, people have to embrace the technology and learn how to use it for themselves and to use it for good and to make it a positive part of the job market. It's currently just a messy part of the job market.
Okay. So if a job seeker is feeling like the people who are hiring, those who hold the purse strings, who have all the quote power, it's not like they're sitting there slashing roles. Like they're figuring it out too. Bring us into the mindset as best as you can of
Yeah.
somebody who is hiring. I know you can't speak for all
Yeah.
hirers and all
Yeah.
industries, but
Yeah.
from what you've seen with your clients, what are they thinking and feeling? And
Yeah.
they theoretically have to figure this out faster than the job seeker, right? If they're
Sure.
supposed to be responsible for
Yeah.
creating 70 net million new jobs, like where
Yes.
are they going?
Yes. I think what's happening right now in terms of how organizations are getting a bad reputation for laying off large groups of people in order to invest in AI is less about like what is happening,
Mhm.
because there is the inevitability of a change in technology. That has been the case over time. That's not new. I think it's the how they're going about doing that is creating a lot of backlash.
Okay.
So there's a very human way to make business change and to support people through business change, and then there's a less human way
Mhm.
to do that. So in the don't know any hiring managers who are laughing all the way to
Right.
the layoffs. I don't know anybody who is doing that. I think there's a lot of survivor guilt for people who
Mm.
did not get laid off. I think that leaders don't wait. There's a pride point. You don't want to be laying people off. So I think that's not in the mind of the hiring manager is not a positive
Yeah.
to get to lay people off. And it also complicates the challenge. You still need people. So I think hiring managers are under the gun to then try to figure out and produce results. So you lay off the people, you put the money into AI. AI is not ready yet. So
Mhm.
you can't show that return that you were counting on.
Mhm.
So it's a tricky time to be on either side of the equation right now. And I'm
Yeah.
not making excuses for anybody. I'm just saying it's hard.
Yeah. Something that I thought was very interesting that you mentioned to me in a previous conversation we had was about how AI is making it very easy and good for people to apply and look like a
Yes.
perfect match. However, then they get into the
Yeah.
process of, I don't know if it's at the interview stage or it all starts to fall apart. So,
Yeah.
assuming that everyone's got their materials together, what do we do? On one hand, when I heard you say people are not the right fit, it made me feel
Yeah.
like, oh, should we be discouraging folks from applying? But wait, there's that statistic that women tend to apply less to roles than men do if they don't think they're fully qualified. And we
Yeah.
want to encourage people like, listen, you miss
Yes.
100% of the shots you don't take. However,
Yeah.
I also heard you of not a great fit. We're wasting everybody's time. So how do we
Yes.
square that circle?
So I'll tell a little bit of a story. In our Inside Out community, again, that's for senior leaders. Last January, we realized we had 16 people in our community who were in between roles. So we popped up this group called the Job Seeker Journey because we wanted to bring them together to support one another. Like we can do this together. We're a community. This is exactly what we do. We assumed that was going to be a short term fix, that we help people, we support them into getting roles. And a lot of them did get jobs. But as of now, we've actually doubled the number of people that are in that job seeker journey. So my point behind that is that there are ways that people can be supporting one another through this process, and I think creating those spaces for people is really important. One of the number one things that those who have found roles have said is that they are being very intentional about their approach to finding their next role. So yes, you have to apply through systems. companies are not going to just skip the system. There's just too much volume and too much need to find the right person very quickly. So, yes, you have to go through the system. But 90% of the leaders who've come back and told their story to our job seeker journey group have found their next role by working with their network, working through their network, reaching out to people to ask questions about what is it really like to work there? It looks like you're connected to somebody. Would you be willing to introduce me? Being able to build and work a network to be able to find a job, like that intentional search makes a difference between the person who is spraying and praying and just putting their information out, which honestly complicates the whole job market. It creates more chaos in the job market itself. And the person who is taking a very intentional approach and building a network. And I'm going to say one more thing about a network. And yes, I have a lot of passion around community and network, obviously, but don't build a network when you need it. I think we are going to have to, just as a group, as humans, we're going to have to make networking a part of how we work. We should always be connecting with people because it doesn't feel great that the moment you need something, that's when you reach out to someone that you're connected with on LinkedIn or to connect. So building that network is step one and creates a path to an intentional job search, which has a more human component to it than
Yeah.
AI.
I like to think of networking as having a mutual fund, right? Like you're investing
Ah,
over time so that hopefully when, you need it, right?
yeah.
When you retire, you have millions in the bank. But question though for somebody who might be pivoting, because this
Yep.
is a request I get a lot. If you're not 100% qualified for this role that you're going
Right.
for, how do you know if you should still go for it? And
Yeah.
I do want to reiterate what you said, the spraying and praying, like that's like
Yeah.
looking at it in a very binary way, right? That's I'm just gonna volume game. And then we
Yeah.
have the extremely intentional, like crafting handwritten calligraphy letters with a basket of cookies. Like these are extremes. Obviously, we're gonna find some kind of balance. So
Sure.
for that person who's in this like pivot moment, yikes, do they still go for it? How do they know if they're quote
Yeah.
wasting the time of the hirer?
I think that's where the network comes into play. When there's someone involved in the process who actually knows you and can speak to the most important parts of the job, who has any sort of perspective on what the company looks for, what the team actually needs. When there's a human involved in the process, then you don't need 100% of the skills. You don't. And most job descriptions are a laundry list of every skill that would be maybe nice for maybe somebody to have. It's not really a clear reflection of what is needed for the job. So being able to ask those questions, what is most important, helps you position your skills for the right thing. But you need a human connection to be able to get to that place. So taking a step back before that, should you apply to the jobs that you're not 100% fit for? Yes, but you should also look for another way to be able to present what you are fit for and make it really easy. So I watched your higher ground, the session that you did with Ashley Cash, and she had some fantastic resume tips. And one of the things she said is hiring managers don't have time to decipher what you maybe could do or maybe couldn't do. And people have a tendency to put their entire history out there and then let somebody else figure it out. Instead of that, I think if you really are a 70% match for the job, it better be incredibly clear that you are a 70% match for that job instead of having a lot of extraneous information that people
Yeah.
have to figure out. So,
Something I say and also have to learn from is the more you say, the less people can understand sometimes. So, yes, less is more. Because
yes.
also, we don't want to distract them. We want to
Yeah.
be very clear and focused. I would love to know what the process is like on the hiring end. So, when somebody
Mhm.
signs up with a, and I know like you're doing more kind of
Sure.
external facing community things, but
Yep.
just, when a person becomes an Aquent client, like who are
Yeah.
they? They're working with you to find candidates. I don't know
Yep.
how like connected you are to the process of when they
Yep.
decide who they want to interview and then ultimately go with. But
Yeah.
of course, I'll be interviewing folks who are the literal recruiters, but you've had such an
Yeah.
interesting bird's eye view for so many years. I'm curious if you
Yep.
could demystify that process for
Yeah.
us a little bit.
So, what's really interesting about what you're saying and what I just said about having a human in the mix is
Mhm.
when you work through an agency, you have a human
Right.
in the mix,
Yeah.
right? So, by going through the process of meeting and talking to a recruiter at an agency who knows something about the client that the client has said that may or may not be posted in the job, and the recruiter has already extracted what that client really needs for the job, that person talking to you and extracting how you fit and making it really clear is the true value of working through an agency and a recruiter. So in terms of the process, like a lot of interviewing is happening on the side of talent, talking to them about what they actually can do, telling them about what's actually important for the role. and then also talking to the client to understand what they're really looking for and not taking a job description at face value.
Let's say somebody, and when I say recruiter, I don't mean
Yeah.
in-house recruiter. So somebody who works for an agency, a staffing
Yep.
agency versus like direct to the brand or company. They'll ask me things like they reached out to me and they want to know my salary, but I also want to know what percentage are they taking? So do I like they're trying to work
Yeah.
backward from the math of the percentage that the recruiter is taking. They don't want to box themselves out
Yeah.
going too high, but if they lowball themselves now, is that going to hurt later? And
Yeah.
so it's already a confusing and often confusing and fraught
Yeah.
time. And then you add a recruiter into the mix. And if you don't know how it works, there's even more question marks. I think
Yeah.
sometimes it could be complicated, but it's way
Sure.
more straightforward than people realize.
Yeah.
So even unless, I guess, again, you can only speak to what you've
Yeah.
experienced and what Aquent maybe charges. But if
Yeah.
somebody is networking with a recruiter, and by the way, is it smart? Should they be reaching out to agencies and they start the conversation about what they're looking for and how much they want to be paid? Do you have guidance on
Hmm.
that? AKA,
Yeah.
is full transparency the best policy?
In today's world of salary, it is even more complex than that. There's a lot of more rules around transparency.
Mhm,
Often, recruiters and talent are both talking in terms of ranges when
mhm,
you first are talking about a role. And I think I would encourage both a recruiter and also talent to talk in terms of ranges, because ultimately it will be the client that will make an offer based on what they have in their budget and based on what they choose for the role. But when you're working with ranges and you know that you're in a comfortable area there, then I think that then you want to dig,
mhm,
because often once you go through the interview process, you get to understand, wow, this job is exactly what I thought it was,
mhm.
or there's a lot more to this job than was explained. So there's no one salary or pay expectation until you understand what you're being asked to do.
Right.
So I would never say I have one number and it's always my number and that is my number. I think you can do a here. I wouldn't consider anything lower than this,
Right.
or I'm looking for a range of this. Like those would be reasonable things to do. Again, in most states now, there are pay transparency laws, so you can actually see transparency. You can see transparently ranges for salaries, and you can use that as a guide. That's helpful
Yeah, and
too.
I'll definitely have somebody on who is, I'm thinking of a person I know who they're making like up to 20% of somebody's salary. So it's in their best interest to advocate for the highest salary. At the same time, they want to place people quickly. So
Yeah,
hearing the tensions
yeah,
that they have to navigate are interesting too. But
yeah.
but more specifically, when it's time for somebody to be hired,
Right.
is there any advice that you can give for getting past like the final interview? Because I work with a lot of clients I coach a lot of people who they're making it to the final round, but
Yeah.
they're not getting the offer.
Right. Yeah.
No. Do you have any
So
recommendations for that or
I'm going to
things?
say there's a lot of reasons behind that. So the
Okay.
best you can do to dig into why you
Yeah.
didn't get to that, because I'll also say business is changing very quickly. You
Um,
may be up for a role that is no longer a role that has been put on hold, a role that was a hopeful role that someone was trying to get budget for and didn't end up getting budget for. It could be that something changes with the business that is changing that role. It could also be that there's an internal candidate who raised their hand and that's an easier path. There's a lot of reasons why you not and someone might not get past a final interview. My best advice that I would give to anybody going through an interview process, period, is to close your interviewer at every single step of that interview process. Whether it's the first interview or the fifth interview, you ask a question at the end, and there are several good closing questions. But certainly, if you begin by asking what the interview process is, so
okay.
can you tell me what the steps are in the interview process? And then if someone says, okay, you're meeting with me, you'll meet with someone on the team, you're going to meet with the leader of the team, you'll do a panel interview with the group, and then there is or isn't a presentation of your portfolio or whatever the last step may be. Once you know what those steps are, your close can be taking your interviewer through the steps. Okay, so I know you said I need to meet someone on the team. When can we do that? You meet the person on the team. Great. Now I know you said I would meet the leader of the team. When do we do that? So you can guide somebody through the interview process because you have the information up front. People are usually afraid to ask that question because they think it's too forward to
Hmm.
say what are the steps in the interview process. But if you know that information, you now have a very easy way to follow up and keep that moving forward. So that would be one bit of advice in terms of closing, is move them forward in the interview process. Another good closing question at the end is to ask a question like, is there anything that you learned today that would prevent me from moving forward in the interview process? That's a great question because there is no wrong answer to it. If they say no, there is nothing, then you say, great. When do we set up the next step?
Uh-huh.
Because you've asked them about the interview process. If they say, yeah, we were actually looking for someone with more healthcare experience,
Yeah.
you may have that experience
Yeah.
and it just hasn't come up through the interview
Yeah.
process. And then you can put forward to them, hey, I actually have healthcare
Uh-huh.
experience. This is what that is and what it looks like. So closing through the process, because generally what happens is people are so excited or nervous or whatever, they get off that call
Yeah.
and that's it. And then they don't hear from people and they don't know why. Getting to the final step, I would say, is there anything that would prevent me from getting to an offer stage? Because you're at the final step. Hey, you said this is the final step. That's wonderful news. I am exploring other offers. I want to make sure that I give yours a serious consideration. Are we getting to that step? So people, I think, are hesitant to close and they lose their power right there at each step of the interview process. But that's my best advice in getting through interviews.
That's awesome. I really
Yeah.
like that. I think I asked Ashley Cash, I was like, any dear God, please do this or don't do this because you're going to be reaching a lot of job seekers through this
Yeah.
platform. So
Yeah.
this is the opportunity. What do
Yeah.
you wish they knew?
Yes. Yeah. And I said this before regarding technology, but I would say embrace it. Do not waste your job seeking time either. Obviously, you're
Mhm.
going to carve out your time to be looking for a role, but because AI is simply a hot skill or just any emerging technology is hot, you're going to need to know how to use it. Companies are looking for people who can bring that skill to them. They are looking for people who know how to work with data. They are looking for people who really understand and are not afraid of adopting the next technology. So when you have this time, it's not free time. You are working, you're looking for a job, and that's a very stressful time. Use it for good. So we have leaders in our Inside Out community who've been involved in our job seeker journey who have taken this time to build custom GPTs to
Okay.
solve problems that they have, like personal problems that they
Uh-huh.
have. For example, we had someone who was obviously struggling with the job application process. So he took upon himself to build a custom GPT to help people through the job application process, help them figure out what information they needed to put forward, help them figure out what the company values, more about the person they were interviewing with. It's called Merlin. You should check it
Uh-huh.
out. But so they took this time to throw themselves into AI to solve problems that they've
Uh-huh.
never had time to do when they're in a job and
Right.
someone is pressing them to do it. Do not waste your job seeking time. Learn some technology while you're in the in between, solve a problem, and then use that story in your interview to show how resourceful you are. So that's something that I would say, please do not waste this time. It might seem scary, but embrace it because it will help you be the best candidate for the role. So,
Yeah, and also something joke about it, but it's very true because I coach all these job seekers. They're like, I miss working. Like, I just want to go back to work. Stop making me look for jobs. Let me
yeah.
work. And I'm like,
Yeah.
great, let's make a project. Like, your
Yes.
muscles are atrophying, your work muscles are atrophying. So this is a perfect marriage of that. Of course, anybody hearing all of this great stuff about the community, they're going to go, how do I join? We'll put all the links in the show
Yeah.
notes, next steps for how people can connect with you, connect with this job
Yeah.
seeker group,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
any links, of course, you'll send my way too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I would say I have been in this recruiting business for 26 years because I love helping people.
Yeah.
And you will find that most people who go into the recruiting business really love helping people. And it is challenging on both sides, whether you're a job seeker, you're looking for someone because it is so chaotic in the job market. So I will, the earlier question you said, should you work with an agency? Should you talk to recruiters? The answer is yes, you should do that. So I say this because I personally love helping people. I'm happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn to give advice and suggestions, to connect them into people at Aquent because I've been here for almost 26 years. So I will send you some links,
Mhm.
but I'm happy to help. And thank you for letting me be
Yeah.
on your higher ground.